I think that summarizes you. If we had a brand for Michelle, I think you are data-driven, no-nonsense badass, and highly empathetic. I think that's the Michelle brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay,
I'll take all
let's
those.
let's dive in. Welcome to the Great Life Experiment podcast. I'm your host, Monique Schafer, and together we'll grapple with our messy, beautiful, and ever-changing personal and professional lives and the business world around us. I deeply believe there is no one right way to do this thing called life. Let's experiment together. As a quick reminder, friends, please note that this podcast is an independent production, and the information presented here and views expressed here reflect my personal opinion and do not reflect the views or positions of any organization or company that I'm affiliated with. Enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to the Great Life Experiment podcast. I'm your host, Monique Schafer, and today we have the amazing pleasure to join Michele Ashby. She is the founder of Ashby Consulting, and we have crossed paths because she is the person you want to know, especially if you're a woman, about how to get on a corporate board. She has deep corporate experience. She has a finance background. She has been in the mining industry, deep connections, and was oftentimes the only woman in the boardroom. I think last time I counted 5 board positions. Is that right? Or has it gone up since then?
8.
8. There you go. 8 board positions. And she is on a mission to help train 1,000 women on corporate boards. And you are currently sitting at how many now that have gone through your program?
The certification program, like the one that you went through, 206.
Mm-hmm.
The online certification, 75. And then if we count the primer, that one has 500. And we are adding a lot of people right now. So I'm over 700, around 750.
That's
And my
amazing.
goal is to train 1,000, and then they will all have the skills to get themselves on board. We'll see how that goes. We
Yeah.
are actually tracking, though, with a very high success rate of those who've been through the primary class like you have, the premium live class. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So Michelle and I got to know each other about 2 years ago because I was at an inflection point in my career. And I think many of you listening might be in a similar spot that you have been in the corporate space for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and you've put the reps in. You have done a lot of work and you have a lot of experience. And probably like me, I was at a point of, I had seen hundreds of customers being in the tech space, helping them go through digital transformation, working closely with how do you help organizations transform, figure out how to move to the cloud. Now, how do you have discussions about AI? How do you do that? How do you build leadership teams? And I was feeling that I loved being an entrepreneur in the corporate space, right? I very much feel like I treat it as if it's my company, even if I don't have the title of CEO. And I wasn't sure how to go about sharing that with other businesses and being able to help them because there were patterns that I saw happening over and over and over again that I knew that if I was in the room with them that I could help prevent so much pain and save a lot of money for them because I had just seen it so much. And I was also feeling like I'm more than my resume, but I don't know what to do with it, right? I had this LinkedIn resume or I had this job resume, but I'm like, I don't feel like it's translating because I work in a big, publicly traded company. You might not have as high of a title as if you were at a smaller private company. Do I qualify? Do I need to wait until I'm 60 and retired? What's my place in the boardrooms? I came to you at a moment because we had mutual friends that had gone through your program and raved about it. And they're like, I think you should talk to Michelle. I think this would be really good for you. I reached out with probably a really heavy sense of imposter syndrome of like, I'm not sure I belong in these spaces yet, but I know I want to someday. And I wanted to feel confident and I wanted to feel competent, that when I walked into those boardrooms, I knew what to do. And so your message, that seems like what you are about. Of how do you help women feel competent and confident in the boardroom? I was like, yes, sign me up. So that is how I came to you. For people that don't know you, I would love for you to share a bit of your journey into the boardroom and then what you have created with your programs to help that confidence and competence.
Exactly. And Monique, thank you so much for having me, because this message that I have, which is to get as many women into the boardroom as we possibly can, because this is where the power and the money are, and this is where the biggest decisions are being made. And we can really affect the world from that pinnacle at the top, right? And the way that you just described how you felt when you were on your quest to find that, like, am I more than just a career, and what would be next for me? And am I too young or am I too old? All those kinds of things. Exactly how the majority of women feel that I work with. And so that was a really great explanation. I'm sure that many of your listeners have the same things. My journey is that I started out as a stockbroker. Then I decided to specialize in gold stocks, became a mining analyst. And it was at a time where it wasn't very popular, which is a good time to get into something, because you can usually excel at it, learn a lot while nobody's looking, and then come out of the gate looking like you're the expert because you chose something that other people were not paying attention to. And that's exactly what happened. I became one of the top 10 brokers in the country in the gold mining space. And then I started a trade association for the gold mining industry, and I ran that for 18 years. So I worked with the CEOs of all the publicly traded producing gold mines around the world and their largest investors. And I was almost always the only woman in the room or in front of the room. And I was doing a lot of things that these mining companies needed, which was bringing the capital to their projects
Mhm.
and bringing investors to their stocks and helping to affect their stock prices. I understood the markets really well. That's one of my expertise, is the capital markets.
Mhm.
And through that process, they all knew who I was because there was only one, right? We have this advantage, right? And this is what one of my male mentors taught me. He said, Michelle, you really have an advantage over me and all these other guys that are in my class, because you look at us, we're all in the same suit. We have the same basic degree. We're all going for the same basic job. And you are an outlier. You look different. You represent capital markets on the outside, and you
Mhm.
have access. People want to meet you. And therefore, never think of yourself as being less because you're a woman. Think of yourself as being more because you're a woman.
Mm.
And that was one of the best pieces of advice that I ever had. Not that I was shy or had
Yeah.
a problem asking for what I wanted along the way or trying to figure out how to get there.
Yeah.
It was just an
Before we move on
example
in
of the
your story, I want to double click on that because I wrote myself a note and I know you and I could talk for like 6 hours and I'll never come back to it. What I loved about John's framing, and correct me if I'm wrong, John was not saying you have an advantage because we have a quota to fill. He was saying you bring a different perspective and a different network, and that amplifies and is an added value to the board in a very real business sense, not just a box to check. Is that correct what he was saying?
Yeah, it is. I believe that we all have our unique, everybody talks about value proposition. I talk about unique proposition. You have a
Mhm.
unique proposition from me and from any of the other women that were in your cohort. And that's what I want to find in each one of you. What is your unique proposition, and how do we find it together, right?
Mhm.
Then how do I reflect it back to you and try and help you to own it, so that when you're not with me, you are speaking about yourself in that position of I am XYZ, right?
Mhm.
And you are owning that unique proposition, and that is what makes you stand out. And you sound different than other people. You're representing yourself in the way, in the vernacular. We talk about vernacular of a board member. in that executive vernacular, and you're heard, right? And you're asking the questions in a way that is motivating for the other person.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Okay. So you were on your journey, trade association, 18 years, male
Yeah,
mentor, and being like,
lots of
yes,
them. Yeah.
people want your network and your experience. So then what was that leap for you from, or bridge from trade association into the boardroom?
A phone call. One
Mm,
of the guys that was a member of our organization called me one day, and we, I knew a lot of these guys on first name basis personally because I did a lot to help them succeed and supported them and cheered them on and promoted them, et cetera, invested in them even. And therefore, for him to call, he's like, "Hey, Michelle, it's Rob." I'm like, "Oh, hi, Rob. How are you?" He goes, "Great. Listen, I just took a controlling interest of a little public company and I'm putting together my board and wondering if you'd like to join my board." "Sure, I'd love to." "Okay, great. I'll be back in touch." Click, that's it. Okay, that's the good old boy network, how it works with the people you know. And that's
yeah.
why I teach people that your best shot of getting on a board are with a network, with people who are that you have that kind of a relationship where they have your phone number, you have their phone number, you can call them, they can call you
Yeah.
and have a conversation.
Yeah. And so speaking to putting yourself into spaces and places so people know that unique value proposition that you bring, that unique
Mhm,
value. And so they know, hey, I have a need, who is top of mind, or
mhm.
I know how to bring her voice into a room even if she's not there because you have this need. I know the person for you. That's a great
Right.
reminder.
So I was, again, only woman in the room. I had a great chairman, CEO. And he asked me, he said, "Do you have anybody else you'd recommend for a board?" And I said, "Yes, I know one. I know another woman that I would really recommend. She's amazing. She sits, she's in Wall Street." He's like, "Great." So he brought her on board. There were only 4 board members. So this is 2005. We had a 50-50 board. We had 2 women and 2 men. And then he asked me, "Do you have anybody in mind who could be the president of the company?" I said, "Yeah, I know, I do. I know a woman geologist who has her own consultancy in Nevada. Our major project was in Nevada. I think she would be perfect." She got the job. So it was all by referral. And
Yes.
he took all my referrals, which was pretty
Yes.
amazing,
Hmm.
right? That was my first board. And then the next boards came pretty easily.
Okay.
I started my own business after I left the trade association, and I expanded into base metals, oil and gas, clean tech, and I went global into Africa, Asia. I was working with a lot of bankers in Switzerland, Europe, and also in the UK, as well as North America. And I started getting invited to boards, in fact, too many that
Mm.
I had to say no to some people.
Hmm.
And, but all of them were relationship based and people that knew me and knew of my reputation, knew who I was and respected me. And I was very lucky because I had the invitations coming to me as opposed to me having to go out and look for those positions.
Would you say in your experience for most people, the biggest leap or transition is onto that first board? And once you've been on, then you're more likely to be on other boards, similar to your experience. Do
Mhm.
you find that that's a common pattern?
It is. It doesn't mean that it's easy to get on number two, but it helps you rise up in the selection process, I believe,
Yes.
when you already have a board on your resume.
Okay.
Okay.
And now you're in your journey. You've now been on board one, you've been invited to board two, right? At this point, right, you're at number eight. But as you were describing, you started to have more requests to be on the board than you could take. And was this the point that you felt like, hey, I know other talented women. How do we make sure they are known? Or at what point did you switch from the world of being the sole woman to having your consulting firm? And now we were talking about how do we get to train 1,000 women?
Mhm.
Talk to me about that journey.
That's a really good question.
Or take it
I,
however you want if
you
that's not the
know,
right
I
framing.
have, yeah, I have 30 years of being almost always the only woman in the room. And There were only a handful of women that I trusted. So the women that I was referring to boards, I mean, my list was really short, like less than 5.
Mm.
And once they were all boarded and there was like no one else that I would add. From the female standpoint, I didn't hang out in women's organizations because not just because of the trusting thing, but because the men ran everything. And so if you wanted money and power, you had to hang out with the guys. And that's where
Mm.
I was all the time. And I was trained by all of them. I was mentored by them. And, I always laughingly say I'm really a 63-year-old white guy inside because that's how I was. If I were a guy, they would have trained me the same way. They would have treated me
Yeah.
the same way. I was part of the good old boy network, and that's how that
Mhm.
part of it worked. The beauty of that is that I have all the secret stuff. The other part about being in the good old boy network is you don't talk about everything. You don't tell people how this works. You don't, it's like there really is kind of a unspoken rule about around that. Otherwise, you'd see it on YouTube and in books and all over the place, but it's not.
Yes. Yes.
Okay? And therefore that makes this really unique. And the way that I got into helping women was in 2016. I was on 2 boards and I decided I was going to get a portfolio, which means I'm just going to do board work and work part-time
Mhm.
and then semi-retire. And I was asking my guys, for boards. I was putting my little feelers out, letting people know I was looking for a couple more boards. And at the same time, there was all this media coverage on women, the lack of women on boards. And I was like, I don't get it. Because I assumed there were many women like myself who'd
Mm.
risen in the ranks and were invited in. And, they were in other industries, yes. And it wasn't that unusual. So, being the analyst that I am, I started talking to women. I'm like, okay, I see statistics. I want to know for real. And I became a mentor in a program called Board Bound with the Women's Chamber. And they assigned me to one person that I was supposed to work for an entire year.
Okay.
And so that was going on. And then in the meantime, I'm having breakfast, lunch, dinner, cocktails with all these women. And my question is, why aren't more women on boards? Why aren't you on a board? What's your background? And I'm
Mm.
taking notes and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this woman, you talk about imposter syndrome. I would come home, I had this file that was called the Superwoman file. And I was putting all my notes in there because I thought someday I'm writing a book because people won't believe how talented and skilled all these women are. Like,
Yeah.
where are they hide? They're hiding.
Yes,
And
and they don't even
I
know their worthiness.
no, and I felt they were so qualified, and yet they didn't know what they didn't know. So this was the other side of it, which is I kept going, really? Like, I don't know more than they do. How could I know more than they do? They were like GE corporate America, or
Yeah.
worked in these high rolling things or ran large corporations. And I was like, okay, it like was beating into me. Finally, because I was talking about it all the time, I called it my woman thing. One of my male mentors said to me, Michelle, why don't you do something about that? Because when you talk about these women, you just light up.
Mhm.
And frankly, the last thing I wanted to do was start a new business. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And to be the first one out the gate is a lot of work because I did my homework. I was like, okay, there must be another program that's out there just for women that's going to get this done faster. And back then the homework showed me I could go to Harvard or I could go to Kellogg for a weekend, 15 grand. Oops.
Yeah.
By the way, you have to be the CEO of a major company to get in. I was like,
Mm.
well, that leaves out 99% of us.
Yes.
And what do you get? You get a line on your resume that says Harvard board program. That's it.
Mhm.
And I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't stop my mind. It was like, okay, if I do this, what is it going to look like?
Mm.
And I got out a legal pad and I filled it. I sat up for hours and I created ACE. I created the program, the curriculum, what it would cost, how long it would take, who are my ideal clients. I made the commitment. If I'm doing it, I'm going to train 1,000 women. This
Mhm.
one woman at a time is BS. We will never get there
It won't
unless we
scale.
speed this process up. And I don't want to do this till I die. I want to do this, be effective, get everybody in there, and inspire women and move the needle. And then I can go into my semi-retirement and sit on my 3, 4 boards, right? And that has been my plan. And so I launched, and that's how we got here. The
I love your
internal thing,
urgency.
yeah, I want to
Some
talk a
people call it
little.
impatient. I call it urgency.
Yeah, I've always had that. Well, when it kicked in, I knew it was really had to be done quickly
Mhm.
because I knew we had a window. I knew we were in a bull market and it was going to go away, and I was right because the door just kind of tried to slam. But the other thing that was really critical for this was, how do I change myself internally from not trusting women? And how would I stand in front of a room of women like your cohort and teach and be trusted if somewhere inside of me I didn't trust women? You would identify that in a nanosecond. You might
Yes.
not know it consciously, but you would know it intuitively. And I was on a journey of two things. One, to find out why women hadn't come farther with all of the movements that we've had since the 60s. So I was
Mhm.
studying all of that information, reading books, watching period movies and documentaries and all that kind of thing. The other thing was, how do I change myself? What is the work I have to do for me? And the contract that I wrote with myself was about being honest, being open, authentic, and sharing everything I've learned and everything I know,
Mhm.
regardless of if one of my students would to turn around and stab me in the back. That was irrelevant. What was relevant, what was way more important, to get this going and to see if what I knew would be beneficial to others. And that contract is the one that I signed.
And that seems to have been serving you well so far in that transformation. And I when I came to your program, I thought I was signing up for tactical, what do I need to do, making sure and I'm in the tech and the finance space, so I knew how to read financials, but it's always good to know what are the different committees, how do they work, all that. So I thought it was going to be very, very tactical, and it is. But the thing that surprised me was, one, the caliber of women in that room that we still meet every Friday. Every Friday, right? We have an open Zoom for our Sixters group, that's what we call it, to come together. But how each of us, no matter if there was a C in our title or not, or where we were in the journey, or 15 years or 30 years of experience, there was a lot of internal exploration that needed to occur of what is the value that I bring, realizing that you are enough to share
Uh-huh.
where you are. It's like, not you have to be something someday, but for the experience that people have now. And there were, I think, for a lot of people, things that they needed to look at, whether it's, for you is your relationship with other women. Whereas I grew up in, like, yes, amplify women and sisterhood, and like we need to lock arms. So I never had that tension, with women, but it was, who am I with men in the corporate space? So I almost had kind of
Yeah.
the inverse. So I didn't expect that. And I think that's one of the things that I loved about your in-person course as well. Like, I very much, that the content is there online, but for me personally, having that space to think about it and reflect and build those relationships was really, really helpful for me.
Yes. And what you're reflecting is has been repeated in 22 cohorts so far.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's magic. It's
Yeah.
absolute magic. You are meant to be with each other.
Hmm.
I'm the vessel, I'm the conduit. You are meant to be connected.
Yeah.
And
So
then
as
it's up
you
to you to take advantage of it and keep it.
keep it going,
Mhm.
yes. So as you have your 23rd cohort coming up, and I had all these notes, Michelle, you and I, as I said, we could talk for hours. I think this next cohort, and maybe you had seen it in the one that you just had as well. These cohorts are in a different space than we were a couple years, and we touched upon DEI and the focus on getting more women into the boardroom, and you were hearing it in the media more, and that there was a moment in time, and with the change in how we're thinking about DEI, and not such a loaded term phrase, however we want to take that. But all of that is shifting since your prior cohorts. So I'd love to get your take on what you are seeing, trigger word aside, politicized phrase aside, about the future of women in the boardroom, because I know there are a lot of women that are now asking, do I still have as much opportunity? I was always qualified, but is the door going to be slammed shut? Am I not, do I not have a space? So talk about what you are seeing for the future of women and maybe how diversity was normalized and what you're seeing now.
Right. So as I mentioned, we were in a bull market. So in 2012, Obama put in place
Mhm.
this diversity and it started to kick off and it started gaining momentum. And then it picked up even more after George Floyd, including more women of color and people of color. And we were rocking. When you look at the number of women that got on publicly traded boards, it was phenomenal.
Mhm.
And that was when that it was a once in a lifetime opportunity for that huge influx, if you will. And we've just recently had a reversal on a terminology, on an acronym. And I say the future for women is actually better. And the reason is because we've normalized it. The short thing is it's normalized. It's now normal to have women in the boardroom. It's much more normal than it was 10 years ago. The conversation isn't, we have to have a woman. The conversation is, we want a woman or we want the best person. We're okay with all kinds of variety that we may not have even considered before. So there was this unconscious piece that was in place before we had all this opportunity and we were given special treatment. And now we're getting treated like everyone else. It's okay. You're going to, you're still going to be able, the door is still open. And the important thing is to keep our foot there so that it doesn't get shut and just keep, and bring others in.
Mhm.
Right. And we have so many more gentlemen who, like I said, it's normalized for them and that are willing, if you will, to consider women, men, minorities on the next time that they're looking for a board member. That to me is a huge positive.
Mhm.
And we have something happening right now that most women are unaware of. And I think we talked about it a little bit in regards to wealth. And what's happening right now is the largest transfer of wealth by gender in history, the largest transfer of wealth by gender in history, and it's going to women. So in the next 4.5 years, by 2030, we're going to see over $100 trillion transfer, $100 trillion, and 70% of that is going to women. Money is power. If we're not ready, if we don't understand what's happening, if we are not prepared to step into that boardroom, take for instance, you're the spouse of a CEO and he suddenly dies. And now you could become the CEO. You inherit that. You could inherit that. What are you going to do? Can you handle it? Do you know how to deal with it? Do you
Mhm.
know how to appoint someone other than you to the CEO? Do you know anything about succession? Do you know how the board functions? Do you know the role of the board? Do you know what your power is? Perfect story is the Post, okay, which is with Katharine Graham in 1975. Her husband dies. She becomes the owner of the Washington Post, one of the largest newspapers in the country.
Mhm.
And she's the first woman on the board of the Associated Press. And they're patting her on the head going, nice little girl, just sign this agreement,
Mhm.
just sign off on this resolution. It's going to be fine. We're going to take care of you, honey. Honey,
Mhm.
I want women today to be in a different position than she was in 1975.
Mhm.
And whether or not you aspire to the board yourself, if you're ready to get on a board, you're going to be in a more realistic position to lead now or in 5 years or in 10 years. And I've seen, through the women that I've trained, transformation. Maybe they don't want to get on a board right now, but they end up CEO. They're like, my next step is CEO of a company. Or my next step is I leave my job and I start my own business.
Yes, that's important
Empowerment.
to
It's
know how.
empowering. It's really encouraging you to step into that power. If that's what you are, if you are a leader, if you want to be in that role, it isn't for everyone, as you know.
Yes. Well, and I like what you just pointed out, that being on a board can take a lot of different shapes, right? You can be an independent director, somebody outside, right? You can be part of the executive team that's on the board. And I think that the really important piece of with the transfer of wealth, as well as generations of women who are more independently wealthy as well, if you are an investor in a company, getting a board seat as well. And so while a path might be because you're an executive or you have a network, there's also the power of using your money and being an
Yep,
investor and getting on those board seats. And so that
absolutely.
matters too, of if you want to play, no, I shouldn't say play, if you want to be in the investment space and building and um, investing in businesses, it's important to understand your role as a board member too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So men are much more attuned to this, whether they're ready or not. They're more trained into the mentality of, I could be the king of the hill, whereas women are not. And the other thing that I cautionary thing is around money, because I was a money manager. I had a lot of clients. I had managed a big book of clients of investors, and women were afraid of money. They didn't understand the stock market. And we tend overall to look at the stock market as very risky, and therefore we tend not to invest at the level that our male counterparts do. And that's part of why our retirement egg is smaller than our
Mhm.
male counterparts. And those are data facts that we can kind of track and find. If we're not ready, the wealth could be stolen from us. It could be, somebody could fraudulently take it from us or convince us that they're, going to be, like with Catherine Graham, honey, it's going to be okay. I'll take care of
Yeah.
your money and I'll send you your little check every month. You're going to be fine. And we have no idea that they just absconded with the majority of our wealth. These are really important things for all of us to understand, Monique.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're bringing that up because I definitely follow people online speaking to millennial and Gen Z of getting comfortable earlier with money and what do you do with your money. And to your point of how big though the transfer of wealth is going to be. And so if you don't have that blueprint and you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever age you are, and that influx is going to happen, how do you get yourself prepared for that and for generational transference as well, right? So in the
Yes,
example of it, it might be, husband to wife, but from parents to children. And are you ready for that? Because oftentimes we don't have the luxury of knowing when that's going to happen. And so
right.
are
Yeah.
you prepared?
Yeah, I'm in
Right.
the boomer generation. So the baby boomers are going. We're going to start dropping here like flies at some point, and it is going to go to our kids. And this is one of the conversations that we have a lot with each other is
Mhm.
around the transfer of our wealth to our children, our assets, and all those kinds of things. And yeah, so I feel like it's important for all of us to have the will and have the trust and have the all these things in place and make sure that we communicate them as best as possible to our family members so they know where to find the information they need to, who to get in contact, all those kinds of things. So we're
Mhm.
kind of getting off track here, but
Oh,
these are really good life practices
yes.
for all of us to have, men, women, children, everybody, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so going back to that competency standpoint that you were talking about, right? How do we build the confidence through your program? You have an actual certification program to kind of take away the, oh, yes, she's a woman, but she's not qualified. And so you have a certification program to demonstrate from a skill set, like, yes, I'm qualified. And I know you're not going to give all the secrets away of the boardroom, but would you mind giving the kind of high level outline of the things from a competency standpoint that you think are important and that you cover through your program?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the practical things that we cover are board governance, financial acumen, because every board member, it's a good idea for every board member to be able to read a financial statement. Not everyone is an expert in it, and we don't want everyone to be a financial wizard at the table. We need that diversity of experience, right? Also, what are your risks and responsibilities? You do have liability as a director, so understanding what that is and how are you protected with your insurance, the insurance by the company and the indemnifications, et cetera. And then what I call the gender dynamics in the boardroom, from teaching from a standpoint of women in the room usually you're going to be in the room with all men. There might be other women, but typically you're the first one that's in the room. Now, the secret stuff that I talk about is the patriarchal model. We're all living in it. How do we navigate that successfully and become part of the team? Like I told you, I was in the Good Old Boy Network. I understand, my life is really good. We're all living, in a patriarchal model as a result of what mostly men have decided for our
Mm-hmm.
lives to be to what they look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not complaining. I want to have more women up there because women are different. Women we complement each other. Just
Mm-hmm.
like in a marriage, we bring different things to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And the outcomes are improved. We've got the data that shows your return on investment goes up, the stock price goes up, the retention of your employees goes up,
Yes.
customer satisfaction goes up when you have more women at the top. And I want to live in that world, and I want other women to have that kind of experience that I had, which
Mm-hmm.
is awesome. I love it in the boardroom. It's like I love teaching women and I love board work. Like that's like I get in there and I just totally nerd out. It's just I become a whole different animal. It's crazy. And it's just like an ecstasy. I don't know how to describe it. But we go through the patriarchal model. We go through what I call the executive vernacular, which is it should be familiar to you. And really it's about how to be a successful board member and know what to do. So in the classes, we have a day where we go through a board meeting, and all of you were assigned to a well-known public company and a couple of committees and given some challenges. And we went through the Roberts Rule of Order agenda style of a real public company board and walked through all of the presentations by the committees, the resolutions that were presented, the questions that you would want to think of and ask. In order for you to have a practice, not everyone has had the opportunity to be in a room.
Mm-hmm.
And that's designed to help take away the jitters and for you
Yes.
to know what to expect the first time you get in there. And
Yes.
let's say, for instance, you go to a private company and you all like each other and you suggest, hey, listen, do you have an advisory board? I love your company. I'd love to help you go to the next step. And I have a certification as a director. I know all these pieces that are important. And they go, no, but I've been thinking about it. Maybe you could help me. I'd love to. I'll help you put together your first board, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you can say yes because you know what you need to do. And then
Yes.
you call me and then we walk through how you get that part going, right? You have a solid network. You have a solid underpinning and
Yes.
foundation of what this is like, because it isn't just about here's your board brand and here's how you talk about yourself. It's about the experience. I want you all to
Mm-hmm.
have some type of experience because my job is to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that you're competent and confident when you go talk about yourself in your
Yeah.
elevator pitch, when you go into an interview for a board and win
Yeah.
it, and then the first time you step into that room.
And what I love, Michelle, is that your online program and the primer is open to anyone, right? So for all my male listeners as well, that is open to everyone as well. And then this retreat is just especially designed experience to create that safe space for women in dealing kind of with that discomfort. And so you have the offering for both, open to anyone, right? You're not that there's no form you have to take to prove that you're a woman for the online class. And
Right.
just the in-person is a slightly different kind of curated experience.
Absolutely. And as you've identified, it's like you do have the benefit of the network, right?
Yes.
And then also we promote each one of you, and you go into our profile catalog, so your profile exists on our website forever, and you're also in our catalog. So that's open to any CEO that wants to take a look. And I have companies that approach me and say, we're looking for someone. I always point them to the profile catalog. I'll give them referrals out of
Mhm.
my brain and my memory of
Yeah.
who I think would be a fit. But I always encourage them to go through the profile catalog and see if there are any other women that
Yeah.
they identify that might be interesting. And then I make the introductions and off you go. My role is to get out of the way. I want to eliminate as many barriers to entry as I possibly can for each one of you.
Yeah. And maybe I've a couple thoughts and then we'll kind of wrap with what's coming up for you. I think first, wrapping up on the male and the female piece. So I have a lot of listeners and a lot of men in my network who are complete allies and supportive, or it's just, yes, you were equal. Like, I think you are talented. Let me bring you in. And you have a very great and strong relationship with your mentor, John Kelly, and he comes and he speaks also live in the cohorts. Do you have any one or two takeaways for male mentors or male allies who are listening?
Oh, that's a good question. If they're already our ally, right? They would be doing the things that I would expect them to do, to be the advocate for
Yeah.
you. And I think here's another thing though, Monique. Here's what I would say. Invite a woman to go to a networking event that you think would be beneficial,
Mhm.
or invite them to be to a lunch and introduce them to someone that you think would be beneficial for them. So help build their network in the good old boy network, where you might
Mhm.
not be conscious of it. And if the woman plays golf, invite them to a golf, outing or something along those lines. Or it could be a hockey game or any of those kinds of things, and feel okay about that, because that's where a lot of conversations happen and the
Yeah.
relationships can get deeper, and we can, like, feel more comfortable and build that trust.
Yeah. Or maybe creating spaces where it doesn't have to be golf, because not all of us golf too, of also
Right.
thinking intentionally about spaces where people can be in.
Yeah, and there's plenty of, industry events and that kind of thing. And it just being I just reflect on my male mentors and how they were so intentional with me. Come to this conference and I'll introduce you to my friends. Come to
Yes.
this, mind tour, and I'll make sure that you get to talk to our head geologist. Those kinds of opportunities kept happening for me and allowed me to be seen, recognized. And the whole time I was learning, I was like a student. I was like, this is amazing. Thank you. Who else can I talk to? What else
Yeah.
do I need to know about this? Why do you love the business you're in? Why did you pick this as your career? How did you get into the executive room? How did you get on a board?
Yeah.
Just continuing to learn and dig and pick up as much as you can as you're going along.
So speaking of conversations, you are in conversation with a lot of CEOs, people that are on boards, the chairperson of a board. And my professional space where I'm in separate from this podcast, I hear a lot of leaders talking about, yes, it's still the foundations of running their business. And there's the big pivot of cybersecurity and AI and moving to the cloud. And it feels like everyone is in a state of, I need to hold the business steady and yet totally remake my business. And how do we stay relevant? Those are the kind of conversations I'm hearing. What trends are you hearing coming up more and more from CEOs and that are making their way into the boardroom? And I ask that in particular for people to think of, oh, I have this skill. This might be relevant because this is what's being talked about in the boardroom right now.
Right. Well, you hit right on the most relevant ones right now, cybersecurity and AI, because our regulators are turning up the heat
Say more
in
about that.
regards to, well, they're looking at boards and saying, are you paying attention to this? Because our risk is huge. It's not if you're going to be attacked, it's when. And what kind, do you have cyber insurance? Do you have a policy in place? Do you have training for all the people in the company and your board? Have you hired an outside company that's going to come in and send fake emails or fake images or fake, phone calls that sound like your CEO, and see if you know the difference and
Mm,
what's coming down the pike, and sharing information around those kinds of challenges that we're facing. These are real challenges for business. We have a lot of people who've been in AI and cyber now for a while, and you are very key. That's a key talent for a board. The other talents can be around human resources, so HR,
okay.
because we're challenged with people since COVID. Do we have enough? Do we
Yeah.
not? Well, do we have enough of the right people? Do we have people that are willing to come in to work, or are they all going to be remote? There's still a lot of questions around the workplace, what the workforce looks like, how willing is the workforce to work for us and
Hmm.
do the things that we need them to do? How do we motivate our workforce? How do we make sure they're trained properly? And there's many issues around that. So anywhere where you could see a crack as far as risk goes, so it could be different for different industries, right?
Hmm.
Those cracks again could become opportunity. And if you've got a history of helping with that, you've lived through it, you've survived the downturns in real estate, and you know how it was resolved and what might be okay in the next upheaval that comes along, that's all valuable. It isn't always about the successes you've had. It's also about the things that you've gotten through, okay? Ups and the downs.
Yes.
Being in the gold market has not been for the weak for the last 40, 35 years. Now
Yeah.
we look like we're heroes because it's higher than it's ever been as far as the price of an ounce of gold. Yet for many years it was very difficult industry to be in. People didn't like mining. It's dirty, let's get rid of it, it's killing our environment. Well, you can't live without mining or farming. We have to have mining for all the things, our cars, our phones, our computers, our Zooms, everything, our
Yeah.
outer space travel, electric cars,
Yes.
on and on and on. And we need farming because we need food.
Yeah. I love that mindset takeaway, and I hope people picked up on that of remembering that yes, your resume or your successes or your wins, but it's also the challenges and what you've learned from that and having that lived experience and experimenting through it, right? I mean, there's a reason I call this the great life experiment is because sometimes we get things right, they
Yeah.
change, they morph, and having that real experience in there to bring that to boards to help them think through the next challenge, which won't be identical to the last one, but you've had lived experience to help people navigate. So I hope people heard that.
Yeah,
Okay, well,
absolutely.
I would love to keep chatting, but I know that you are super busy and I'm super grateful for this time.
Yeah.
To wrap, if you had one or two takeaways that you would want people to leave this podcast thinking about, knowing, call to action, what would they be?
The most important thing is that we really need more women in the boardroom because there aren't enough. And we do have qualified women. And the other thing is, I really want to encourage people to take the leap like you did, Monique, in overcoming that voice in your head that says, oh, they're talking about stuff. kind of have that, but I don't really have that. I'd really like to go there, but I don't know that I have enough to stop that and to take the leap and at least kick the tires. Figure out if it's a direction for you that you would like to do now or in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. Don't wait. Do it now because it could happen much faster than you think. I can't tell you how many cohorts I've trained where while we're in the training, one or two of the ladies are tapped for a board just
Mm,
because they tell people, "Oh, I'm taking this board certification class." And the person goes, "Really? You're going to be a certified board member? Well, we're looking for someone. I just finished a class a couple weeks ago, and that happened with one of our members. And she literally just changed the way she spoke about what she was doing to an
mm,
existing client. And they said, "Oh, we'd love to have you on our advisory board. We'll pay you $2,500 a month, and we need you to be available like for 2 hours." Well, I'll take that all day long.
yes. Yes.
So I really, I think my biggest passion is for encouragement. Believe in yourself. You are, you have enough, and start your quest. Like
Yeah.
jump in on your quest, whether it's this direction or another one.
Mhm.
It's an uncertain time. Uncertain times equal great opportunity.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
And it always fires me up because I am always looking for the great opportunity. Find a need and fix it. That's one of my sayings I've always had. Find a need and then fix it. And
I
there's a
love.
lot of need out there right now. And this is the one that I am focused on and want to help as many people as possible.
So
That's
for
my
people that
message.
are listening and this really spoke to them, they're curious, maybe they're not ready to be all in, or they're like, yes, this is the thing I've been
Mhm.
waiting for. Where do they find you on social, your website? How do they get in contact with you and especially learn about your fall cohort?
Yeah, exactly. So the fall cohort would be on the website. So if you Google Michele Ashby board training, you'll find me. The official website is acellc.consulting. And we do have information. We also have a tab with all our candidates. You can see the posts of all of our board announcements because our ladies have now filled over 125 corporate boards so far. Very successful there. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter. Sign up for my newsletter. You'll get something from me on a weekly, bi-weekly basis.
Yes.
And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. And yeah, I'm trying to spread the word as much as I possibly can. Would love to have a conversation with you. If you're interested in the in-person class, like the one that Monique went through that we've been discussing, there is a process. So you would fill out an application and submit that, and then have a one-on-one conversation with me. And I would love to learn about where you are in your career and also about your thoughts around a board journey for you and what you've done so far to get yourself ready. And that's a great conversation that we have. And then determine if it's a good fit for you to be in one of the cohorts that I'm going to be running again.
Wonderful. And we'll make sure to put everything you just described in the show notes below, whether you're listening on whatever podcast platform or on YouTube. And thank you, Michelle. I'm so glad that we were able to do this. This has been, when I look back at events that I've invested in, things that I've done in my career, this is definitely a key thing in my career and my journey. And so I'm just so glad to share this with other people as well. And thank you for what you're doing and the impact you're trying to create.
Thank you. And I'm so excited for you to do this. I love the title of it. It's so perfect.
Thank you. Thank you. As a recovering perfectionist, I needed to give myself an out. So by talking about that it's an experiment, it gives me the permission to iterate. And I think there is no one right way to do this thing called life.
No,
And
there
we're all
isn't. And
looking
I
for the
think
right
the
thing.
authenticity is really the key
Mhm.
for it. And as I said, we have quite a plethora of ladies that love, I'm sure that you could mine a lot of names out of there. I'm happy to help you
Thank
go
you.
through the list and pick some people if you want to sometime.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Thank you for tuning into this episode today. And remember, friends, there is no one right way to do this thing called life. I hope you found this conversation valuable. Please make sure to follow and subscribe on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever you may listen. And it would mean the world to me if you went and you clicked on rate the show and left a 5-star rating to help other people find these conversations. Until then, friends, keep experimenting. Talk to you soon.